Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old Fourth Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Here we go again. Hi, from Atlanta, Georgia. Let me give you a clip from Atlanta News First, WANF TV, early this morning.
Developments this morning involving Georgia's presidential election, and we're not talking about the one that's coming up in November. Right. We're talking about the one from 2020. Our state's election board has voted to ask Georgia's attorney general to reinvestigate Fulton County's vote tally.
So Atlanta News First reporter Rebecca Schramm is live in downtown Atlanta. Rebecca, how did this come about?
Well, Lana and Brooks, the state elections board leans heavily to the right, so much so that former President Donald Trump praised its 3 Republican members at his rally last weekend here in Atlanta. One of those members actually attended the rally. Take a look. Her name is Dr. Janice Johnston. She is a retired obstetrician who was appointed to the board by the Georgia Republican Party. She made a motion yesterday for Attorney General Chris Carr to reopen an inquiry of Fulton County's 2020 vote count, an inquiry that was already closed in May. The resolution says if Carr doesn't act, the board will try to hire an outside lawyer to conduct the inquiry. The board's chair pointed out that this move would likely be met with a lawsuit, but still, the Republican-heavy board approved the measure. Keep in mind, there have already been 3 vote counts that showed former President Trump lost Georgia by about 12,000 votes in 2020. Still, Trump continues to say at every rally he holds, including the one here in Atlanta last weekend, that the 2020 election was stolen. Prior investigations have shown that Fulton County was disorganized and that there were human errors, but not enough to overturn the results. Now, Fulton County's elections board considers this case closed. We will be watching today to see how the Attorney General responds to this request to reopen the investigation.
And as of yet, no word out of Attorney General Chris Carr's office via release or social media or otherwise. Listen, if you're confused by this stuff at this point, nearly 4 years later, so am I. I'm going to read a little bit from Stanley Dunlop's reporting at the Georgia Recorder on this. The vote Wednesday referred the Fulton case to the Attorney General's office for investigation into 17,852 reported missing ballot images, the double counting of more than 3,000 ballot vote images, and other election-related violations. In May, Georgia elections officials with the Secretary of State told the election board that mistakes made by Fulton election workers in 2020 would not have changed Trump's narrow Georgia loss to President Biden. Do you notice, however, what they didn't say was, well, we ran the math, we did or didn't find the missing ballot images. We did or didn't discover the double counting of 3,000 ballot vote images. They didn't crunch the numbers. They didn't do the hard math. And the thing that gets me, and listen, obviously I'm not one that wants to sit here and give air to conspiracy, give oxygen to conspiracies like wildfire. 4 years after the fact, especially, I really at this point just want to make sure that going forward, that what happens in the next 90 days, or what happens in 90 days, is done as openly and transparently and honestly and effectively. I don't think folks realize just how perilously we're treading towards another January 6th, but a January 6th on steroids, if things aren't done in full, open transparency and candor, and Donald Trump loses again. Which brings me to another quizzical non-decision by the board and through the elections office and the Secretary of State's office not to ditch the touch screens, the Dominion voting system. You complicate that with the Coffee County breach, where software was accessed by people who intend to not abide by the law. Obviously, otherwise they wouldn't be breaking into offices. And it just makes you wonder, when you have bipartisan support for hand-marked paper ballots, again, why are we not doing this? This would be, what I'm told, a somewhat seamless effort. And yes, this is a bipartisan effort. Doug Richards from WXIA-TV 11 Alive reporting on this about a week ago.
Yes, DeKalb County's election office is one of many around the state that have been relying on Dominion voting machines for all of its elections since 2020. And now the state election board is getting some kind of multi-directional pushback, saying they should not be used at all.
It's madness, actually, to go into a system and have all of our ballots relying on that.
Gene DeFord is among the Democrats, Republicans, and cybersecurity experts who want the state election board to replace the state's computerized voting system with hand-marked paper ballots this fall. They contend that computer hackers could manipulate elections without a trace. One such warning has come from the founder of Georgia Tech's School of Cybersecurity, who talked with us in 2022.
By the way, this is Richard DeMillo.
If you look at the series of global breaches of cybersecurity systems over the last 2 years, it's story after story like this, where some vulnerability in a system was ignored.
In January 2021, security cameras documented a group of Donald Trump supporters entering the secure area of Coffee County's election office, where they spent hours copying election software.
We believe, the experts tell us, that bad guys, foreign and domestic, are interested in overturning election results or interfering with them. And we absolutely believe they now have really good tools to do that.
Yet voters have told us they do like casting votes on computerized devices.
Computers are fine. I don't see any problem with the computer voting.
The system they have right now is really good. I like it. I like it a lot.
I don't care. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be so dismissive, but I don't care. I like my iPhone versus a wall phone, but I know when it comes to nefarious actors, whether it be domestic or beyond our borders, I know that there's a lot more that a hacker can glean from me information-wise, or even manipulate my own word through text messaging or even emails there's way more damage that can be done to me through my iPhone than can be done to me through a conversation I have on a wall phone. And I'm not saying we need to ditch our cell phones and go back to wall units. I'm saying when it comes to elections, if you can be assured that hand-marked paper ballots that can be right there, physically viewable, easy to deign what voters chose versus a QR code. We've seen when we vote, we get the QR. I have no idea what that means. I have no idea what it says. I know what the screen tells me, but beyond that, I have absolutely no. And if you don't think that hackers today can't hack into a system, you've been to vote, right? You see how simple this process is. There are concerns. And I think between the head-scratching confusion over numbers, what was it, 17,832 or so, folks allege weren't counted at all, and then a batch of 3,000 or so ballots that were allegedly double counted. That is, what is this ballot images? These aren't actual ballots. These aren't ballots themselves. They're ballot images that we're looking at. Give me a hand-marked paper ballot. I'm sorry. The election 2020 was important. 2024, extremely important. I'd rather, in this case, if the state can conceivably and easily go to hand-marked paper ballots using the same scanning devices that they already have in place. We had Marilyn Marks on from the Coalition for Good Governance on. She explained that they have all the equipment. It's an easy transition to a hand-marked paper ballot. That if that can be done easily, there's literally a paper trail here, a viewable, easy to discern paper trail instead of boxes of QR codes that we have absolutely no idea what they mean. Back to the Fulton County recount. Let me explain why this doesn't really make me nervous, to be honest with you. say there were 3,000 ballots double counted. All right, subtract that total from the overall margin in the state of Georgia. That would be, 11,779. That takes you back to 8,779. And those who are alleging that there were 17,852 reported missing ballot images, if you divide the 8,779 by the 17,852, you come up with a 49% margin. Okay, if there were 17,852 not counted at all ballot images from Fulton County, a county that Joe Biden won by 72.65%, okay, count those then. Go ahead. If this is all legit, if there were 3,000 double counted ballots and 17,852 not counted ballots, I say, okay, if you can prove that, if that's factual, I'm going to sleep well tonight knowing that the margin's actually probably going to grow instead of shrink or flip the vote. And you know what? Even if it did, and listen, I'm all about election integrity. I want this to be, again, I've just ranted here for 10 minutes. I want this to be on the up and up. 2020, I want to be on the up and up. 2024, I want to be on the up and up. And I would like to see more from the Secretary of State's office acknowledging the concerns that folks have been ringing the alarm bells for quite a while about. From the left and the right, there are concerns. You just heard Democrats and Republicans agreeing, and cybersecurity experts as well, that we in danger, girl. That the Dominion voting system, and I hesitate to weigh in too much on this because I don't want to get sued by them, but the Dominion voting system, because of the Coffee County breach, is rife for being exposed to those who wish to do nefarious things to our election results. Okay, I kind of got lost in my rambling. The point being, if all of that is true, if there were 3,000 double counts and 17,852 not counts, and it either changes the margin, grows it, or shrinks it, or what if, by some strange anomaly, that particular batch of Fulton County ballots swings wildly in at least a 50% or better margin for Donald Trump when 76% of the county did otherwise? If it changed the outcome of the state, guess what? Joe Biden's still president because the Electoral College still swung in his favor. That's why, for me, if I'm a Democrat on that board, or I'm a Democrat at the state level, I just say go for it. Find out what you're going to find out. We've let this happen before, and in all honesty, under the auspices of Republican elected officials. Brad Raffensperger just reelected 2 years ago to the Secretary of State's office. He is a Republican. And a lot of Democrats probably voted for him instead of for the Democrat that was on the ticket, because some Democrats were like, well, he seems like a nice guy, and he stood up to Donald Trump. He took the call and he stood his ground. We should reward him. I warned against that 2 years ago, but here we are. Let's find out what we're going to find out. This, too, could wind up very poorly for a Georgia elected Republican. Back after this, The Ron Show on America One Radio. Follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platform at Ron Show ATL, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, Threads. By the way, feel free to always call the show. Leave a message, a note, comment, 404-919-2725. Rachel Maddow spent a few minutes talking with Mark Elias about the antics here at the Georgia Elections Board in Atlanta. Take a listen to a little bit of this conversation as I eavesdropped on it as well.
Over the weekend, Donald Trump held a rally in Atlanta where he randomly shouted out by name 3 members of the Georgia State Board of Elections.
Sure.
Those 3 officials have all refused to acknowledge that Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election.
Right.
They are now trying to push through new rules that would make it easier for county-level officials to refuse to certify election results. This seems to be part of a unified strategy. encourage Republican elections officials at every level to refuse to certify the elections no matter what the results are. Doesn't matter where. Doesn't matter if it's a county that Democrats won or a county that Republicans won. Refusing to certify the election at the local level just sticks a wrench in the works, right? It makes it impossible to certify. If you make it impossible to certify a county, then you make it effectively impossible to certify a state.
The irony of that is that it's Republicans that are complaining that it takes hours or sometimes even days to get results. Remember, after the 2020 election, Donald Trump was screaming like a scalded dog about results changing overnight, how when he went to bed with a trajectory of leading and then woke up the next day and was behind. But these are just further delays that are going to delay the inevitable whichever way they go.
And then ultimately, that puts the whole tallying of the presidential election result into question.
Exactly.
Veteran Democratic elections lawyer Mark Elias writes, quote, "It is worse this election than previous ones because this year the GOP is far more organized. They might have tried to subvert the results in a handful of places in 2020 and 2022, but this year they will try to subvert them all." Setting the stage now for what is to come in November. Joining us now is Mark Elias, who specializes in election litigation, and he's the founder of Democracy Docket. Mr. Elias, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
So we've been talking about this on and off for months. We've been talking about it pretty intensively for the past few weeks. Let me just ask you as an expert, if not the expert in this field, am I getting any of this wrong or seeing any of this the wrong way around, or am I presenting this in a way that you think basically captures the facts?
And by the way, if Rachel Maddow's not sure she's getting it right and we're all confused on the sidelines, we're in good company. She's not dumb.
I think you captured it entirely correctly. I mean, the fact is that when we talk about who won an election, we're really talking about two things. We're talking about the unofficial results that people get on election night, which is what AP reports, what NBC and MSNBC use to call elections on election night. But then we are really talking about the certified results. And these are the results that are first approved at the polling place and then at the county. And as you point out, then at the state, and then ultimately in presidential elections that choose the electors, and then those certificates from the governor go to the Congress. And Rachel, if you think of it this way, January 6th was the culmination of a certification dispute, which, as you point out, began, among other places, in Michigan at the county level. And when Republicans couldn't achieve what they wanted to at the county level, they went to the state level. When they couldn't achieve that, they launched a fake elector scheme, which was just another way of undermining accurate certification of elections. When they couldn't do that, they launched a series of frivolous lawsuits. And finally, they attempted to block what on January 6th? The certification of the election. So this has been on their radar screen for some time, and it would be on their radar screen for sure in 2024.
We have seen them not just planning to do this for the 2024 election, but trying it out in multiple jurisdictions. You, among others, have pointed out that this is a tactic at the county elections board level that was essentially unheard of before 2020. But now it has happened literally dozens of times, sometimes in very off the radar, like municipal elections, sometimes in primaries, sometimes in general elections. There hasn't yet been another presidential election during which they've tried it. But what have you learned about how this process works, how these essentially concocted controversies can be resolved when they do this stuff at the county level?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have done more recounts and post-election litigation than any other person ever. And I had never seen it before 2020. In 2020, I represented President Biden and the DNC in 60 plus cases. We saw it in Michigan. But before that, I had done recounts for Al Franken in Minnesota for various Senate campaigns, statewide campaigns. And the idea of tinkering with the certification at the local level was just out of bounds. I mean, that is part of the pageantry of democracy. It is what makes us great as a country, that after a hard-fought election, the election officials celebrate the results by certifying these election results, and whatever takes place in court after that takes place after that in court. But, you know, Rachel, we saw in 2022 that they refused to certify the elections in Cochise County, Arizona, and in several places in Pennsylvania. I sued them. We won. The folks in Cochise County subsequently got indicted for it. And you might think that would serve as a deterrent for 2024. But, as Donald Trump proved, the loyalty to his crimes and misdeeds is stronger than people's instinct for self-preservation.
Briefly, Mark, what can people who are concerned about this do to try to make sure it doesn't happen?
Yeah, so we all play a role. So first of all, thank you for calling this out. Lawyers, we go to court, but, making this public is the big part of the battle. And I'd ask every person listening to this to speak out on this. Don't stay silent. You all have a town square. You don't all have millions of viewers like Rachel Maddow, but each and every one of you can post on social media. You can attend these canvass board meetings. You can file comments in Georgia before the state election board. In your own counties, you can know who is on these boards and you can attend their meetings. Every citizen has a role to play here. And if we all do that, I am confident that we will defeat these efforts and Kamala Harris will be sworn in as the next president of the United States.
All right. His prediction aside, yes, making noise and shaming them is our one tool right now. Back after this.
Call or text The Ron Show anytime at 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Our returning champion for the show from the Coalition for Good Governance, the Vice President, Marilyn Marks. Marilyn, so you're in Charlotte trying to escape the ravages of what's left of a hurricane, a tropical storm now, and trying to get to Las Vegas for a hacking convention. What better time to have you on to discuss election irregularities than right now? First things first, when we talked last week on the show, we actually wrapped our segment and then talked for like another 15 minutes. And I kept telling myself as we were talking, I'm like, this should be a segment. This should be a segment. This should have been a segment. And now we're going to correct that. I want to have you on again because we've seen some of the efforts of the Georgia Elections Board to do either right or wrong, depending on your partisan bent. But you're going to surprise some of my audience when you say that Republicans have this right and Democrats are dead wrong on this. What is that?
We're talking about the relook at the Fulton County investigation for the 2020 tabulation errors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Fulton made a mess, as did several other counties, of the 2020 tabulation, and the Secretary of State had a big hand in it. The problem is that it is a huge mess. Anybody who looks at it deeply would agree that those particular tabulations should have never been certified as correct. However, even though they are incorrect, it probably very, very likely does not change the fact that Biden won by about the same margin. The problem here is that thousands and thousands of ballots were miscounted, many for Biden, many for Trump, but it kind of nets out. And there is a reason it appears to net out. And Rob, we've been on this for 3+ years. We have not made a huge deal about it because it creates such partisan rancor.
Mm-hmm.
And, and we've been asking the AJC and other reporters for 3+ years to cover this before it got to this point. We were fearful it would not reach the surface until a politically sensitive time like now. This should have been dealt with. So let me tell you what happened. Again, I want your listeners to hear that there is no evidence, although the evidence is pretty incomplete. There is no evidence that Trump actually won. There is hard evidence that the numbers are a mess, and we would never want to see this kind of mess again, particularly in 2024.
Right.
And it's been known by Republican activists for a long time that continued to do a lot of work in this. The problem is, in part, that the people who brought this complaint to the Secretary of State, to the State Election Board some time ago, not all their claims are responsible. And yes, they are election deniers. And one of the guys in particular is particularly irresponsible and reckless in his claims.
Are you talking about Joe
And
Rossi by chance, who gave the
no,
13-minute
not Joe, but
dissertation?
no, his partner in that is a particularly irresponsible guy.
All right.
And but the problem here is that some of the claims are incorrect and overblown.
Mm.
And what's happening is that it is covering up by mistake. I mean, it is collapsing the whole case into, oh, this must mean nothing, where there are some very serious, inaccurate claims of double counting, triple counting, not counting,
Right.
and then counting test ballots. And what appears to have happened is that, and this is not new news, it has just been concealed for a long, long time. We've known this for a very long time. And that is, there are thousands of ballots that were double scanned and double counted, some even triple counted. Then there are also well over 1,000 ballots, and then just Fulton County now, that were not counted at all. And then in the final official recount of the presidential race, there were test ballots that were stuffed in to apparently try to make things balance.
By whom? By whom, though?
It would have been done by Fulton County staff. But
Wow.
similar things were done in 11 counties. And what I believe probably happened, and I want to be careful about how I'm saying this because I don't want to be alleging that somebody in particular created a crime, because I have not, fully analyzed everything enough to do that. Have to be careful here.
Mm-hmm.
I will just say what it appears to look like in our long time of looking at this work is that, remember, there was the first official count that was certified was the machine count. That's normal, okay? And this would be up and down the ballot, every race from mayor of Podunk to the president in 2020. Okay, everything gets certified based on that official first machine count.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was a hand count audit of the presidential election only. And it was a really messy audit. The Secretary of State didn't know what he was doing. He sent out procedures that made no sense. And Rob, at that time, we were fussing and saying, whoa, this is not going to work. You shouldn't be doing an audit this way. It's going to fail. And sure enough, it failed, but it got covered up. And that's what Rossi first filed his complaint about, is that the numbers weren't right. The Secretary of State's office had apparently removed some numbers, added numbers, double counted batches in the work that they did. And lo and behold, the numbers balanced. But they balanced only after the counting wasn't correct. And batches were missing and batches were added and that sort of thing. Okay. So then what happens is Trump, by all rights, had a right to a recount.
Mm-hmm.
He had a right to a hand count recount, according to the law. But the Secretary of State wrongly gave Trump a machine count. And Trump didn't, who God only knows why, Trump didn't fuss about it, and he should have. Because if they had followed the law, if Trump had insisted on following the law and Secretary of State had followed the law, what would have happened is a very tedious, precise hand recount, way different from this silly hand audit that they did.
So how do you do a hand recount with QR codes from Dominion, though?
Okay, well, that is a problem. Okay, if we ignore the problem and we shouldn't have to ignore the problem, but we have to ignore it for the moment. Remember how that QR code results are supposed to have been printed. They're printed out on the bottom of the ballot that would have said Trump or Biden.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that it matched the QR code.
Right.
Okay, but all they have to under this silly system, all they have that can be used as a manual recount is that human readable text that said Biden or Trump.
Okay.
And so the way a hand recount was supposed to work, the kind that was required by law, is that a Biden appointee, a Trump appointee, a Libertarian appointee for Joe Jorgensen, and a staffer would be at every single counting table. And they would agree on the counts. It would be very public. The press could be there. The public could be there. The worksheets, the tally sheets would be, would be public, and it would be a process that every single ballot would have been inspected and hand tallied by, hundreds of people, with all these counting tables, and it would.
This sounds like a televised event in the making. Like this could be a great reality TV show.
Right. All right. And so because Trump would have had an appointee, a counter, and Biden would have had a counter there, it would have been awfully hard for Trump to say, "Oh, you miscounted. It was his people who were counting."
Yeah.
Okay. So
opportunity missed.
Well, in one has to ask, why didn't Trump ask for that rather than letting the ballot box get slammed closed and then him screaming about it? Well, I mean, that could have been a strategy, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, why if you eliminate something to bitch about, then you have nothing to bitch about.
Well, but nobody really understood.
That's true too.
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. You're right in what you're saying, that he needed something to bitch about, so he could bitch about the machine counts and all of that.
Let me ask you a question, though.
He had the opportunity. Yeah.
So the discussion about there being a state law that mandates certification by a deadline. I mean, is that the problem? I mean, there seems to be like a short. I don't think it's short, but there's a hasty window. The state is going to Brad Raffensperger is going to be in this unenviable position now, thanks to the state elections board decision, to insist on certified results from the county level by a certain date, even if these nefarious ne'er-do-wells at the county level who may be doing Trump's bidding aren't going to be ready to cough up the results.
Okay, that is a whole different issue.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I guess my point was, did this have something to do with the mess that was the recount in 2020, and death threats at certain county officials and et cetera and so on?
No. I mean, I want to come back to that certification issue because that is way overblown and way out of context as well. But if we can just finish up on this point of the Fulton. Okay, then what should have been done was this very transparent recount instead of that stupid hand count audit, and then the election results would have been certified under the eyes of the press, the partisans, and it would be rare when three parties are sitting at the counting table for them to disagree on what the results are of that stack of ballots, right?
Yeah, exactly. Math is math.
You're right. Exactly. All right. So then what happened, though, is that a mess was made of counting the ballots in Fulton and about 11 other counties. Okay. It got hidden by the Secretary of State's so-called audit. They brushed away all of these discrepancies. And then there people like Joe Rossi began to complain. Other people began to do more work on the ballot images, which became public records, and really studied the double, triple counting nature of those ballots and the missing ballots that were not counted in the official recount. And they have a really good point. The problem is that some of the false claims have gotten mixed in with the solid claims. Therefore, it's been easy for the Democrats to just brush it all away because they don't want to talk about it. Not understanding that we cannot let these kinds of procedures happen again in 2024. Democrats could get just as, they could get hurt with procedures like this where things aren't done well. Okay. Now, what happened is that even though the Secretary of State's office was very much a part of the wrongdoing in the counts in 2020, the state election board let the Secretary of State's office investigate itself.
Yeah.
Well, I don't mind any investigation so long as you let me investigate myself. I guarantee you I'm innocent.
That's
I
right.
did it all right. But anyway, so Rossi has been complaining about this, and rightly so, because the Secretary of State's office, in their reports about their own investigation, supposedly of Fulton, they have lied to the state election board and made claims that they just have no idea whether these ballots were counted twice. It's clear as a bell. Our intern level people could figure that out.
Wow.
And they have covered this up. And the Democrats, in many ways, and progressive groups really don't want to talk about, the mess in 2020.
Yeah.
And so they have pitched a partisan fit saying, don't look at that anymore. Don't look at that anymore. No, we need to have it looked at.
Yeah.
The valid parts of that complaint.
Well, as I pointed out in my first segment, and you said it yourself, it doesn't look like the change, the outcome would have changed. But even if it had, Georgia's not necessary in the 2020 numbers now.
Exactly.
So just go ahead and do it right.
Exactly. And satisfy people's concerns.
Yes.
But learn from this experience so that we don't have the same thing happen in 2024.
1,000%. Well, we started this conversation, and I'm going to take a quick break and come back to you because I'm going to give you about 7 minutes to tell us specifically what it is that Democrats are dead wrong about on this and Republicans are right, and how this actually might work out for us if they get this right. We're with Marilyn Marks, Vice President, Executive Director, Coalition for Good Governance. Back in just a sec when the Ron Show returns. Final few minutes of the Ron Show, and one of those opportunities where I get to flex my muscles when it comes to not having partisan blinders, y'all. I can say Democrats are wrong on something. And those of you who knew I was critical of Stacey Abrams, the way she ran her campaign in 2022, that Joe Biden should have been a one-term president, I think I have a little bit of credibility on this. But Marilyn Marks joining me, Executive Director, Vice President, Coalition for Good Governance. We were talking off air after our segment last week, and she kept telling me, Democrats are wrong on this, Republicans are right, and they need to get this right. Explain what you're talking about.
All right. You're talking now about the Fulton relook, or are you looking at on the certification matter?
Yeah, I think the relook is important, and I think the certification. Yeah, I mean,
the reason that
but I mean, hang on, I'm sorry, don't mean to interrupt.
Okay, excuse me.
But this comes to the pivoting to the hand-marked paper ballots. Wouldn't you agree?
One factor, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So the reason that the Democrats and Republicans need to get this right in terms of the relook at 2020 is because what will be exposed is a massive level of sloppiness and willingness to conceal major errors to keep from having embarrassment. And the Democrats need to realize this same recklessness could go against them in 2024, and that they cannot take that risk. Everything is pointing out that Georgia's going to just be, a real toss-up, right? At least what we think today. Mm-hmm. We cannot afford to have, a few thousand votes double counted here and a few thousand votes not counted there.
Yes.
And the Democrats have got to get over this idea of just print it, just certify whatever comes out of the machine, which takes us to the current incredible, bitter partisan fight that is going on right now over the rule that was just adopted that for certification, the board members who have to certify can take a look at the underlying documents to make sure they're correct.
Yeah.
Okay, both parties are wrong here. Sorry for my being so negative. Where the Republicans got it, okay. What has happened here is that there were, as we just talked about, problems in prior elections with the numbers being wrong. And people were just certifying blindly and not having a good canvas. A canvas is a term for all of the work that's done to make sure you've got all the precincts reporting, make sure you've got all the mail ballots, tie and, tick and tie everything. Make sure you've got the same number of people that checked into the poll books as actually you've got ballots for.
Yeah.
It is a ballot accounting. It is something that the board is responsible for right before they do certification. The problem is the Secretary of State and the State Election Board have never set out in a form any standards for doing the canvass. And it is required by law, but nobody looks at the law. And because the Secretary of State hasn't told them how to do it, people have been skipping the canvass and going straight to certification. And the Democrats are right in saying certification is a ministerial duty. It is required by law. It has to be done on time. And they are not recognizing that the canvassing before has not been done. You're right. Once you canvass, you have to certify, but they're not canvassing properly. And the Republicans got it wrong when they put in the law, we get to take a look at documents before we certify. No, they should have written it as we, of course, have to take a look at all the documents and canvass on time. And then, yes, we are required to certify after we have an accurate canvass.
So can we expect the Secretary of State's office to finally come out with some sort of policy?
No. Hell no. They are not going to do it because it would be too much work, they would think, and it would show that they were wrong. And the State Election Board should be telling them they must do it or do it themselves so that there is good canvassing. And where the Democrats were wrong is they have been telling their own board members in some of these big Democratic counties, including Fulton, they've been telling the members of the board who have to certify and have to canvass, they're the same people. The people who do canvassing, same people who do certification, they have been literally saying, no, we're not going to let you look at the records. That is completely wrong. And they are not taking responsibility for that. And so that's why we have the mess. Those numbers we talked about of double counted, triple counted, not counted ballots in 2020, that should have never been certified. And it was certified because there was no canvass and because people were not looking at the records to see if they made any sense. And the Democrats are yelling, we want to keep doing it the same way we have been doing it. And the Republicans are saying, wait a minute. No, the numbers need to be right, but they have gotten their terminology mixed up. It has created a partisan battle that there is no need for. There is not another state arguing about such things when everybody in this nation could agree that in all material respects, the numbers need to be right before they're finalized.
Absolutely. And, the thing is, I mentioned earlier in my show, like when Brad Raffensperger was up for re-election in 2022, most Republicans just sucked it up and voted for him, even though that there were some MAGAs that didn't like him. But a lot of Democrats gave him a pass, too, because, he's a nice guy. He stood up to Donald Trump. He stood up to mean tweets. And, the nefarious phone call, obviously. But there really wasn't enough scrutiny on the job and the mess that he made and the lack of leadership that he's giving to those at the county level to do this very job correctly. And that's something that
absolutely
is going to come home to roost.
It is. It absolutely is. And I disagree with the people who say that Brad Raffensperger stood up to Trump. He didn't stand up to Trump. He stood up and defended
himself
crap voting system.
Yes, himself.
And his crap voting system. He did not want the scrutiny on we see that there are thousands and thousands of votes counted wrong. He did not want that scrutiny, and so no way was he going to let Trump's people take a look at anything. And Trump, of course, wasn't really asking for a legitimate look. Trump was just as much at fault for not exercising his rights to get a hand count recount and let them and then gave him something to complain about. But Brad Raffensperger wasn't standing up to Trump. He was concealing the problems. In no way was he going to allow anybody to look under the hood.
All right. Marilyn Marks, Vice President and Executive Director, Coalition for Good Governance. A fantastic segment today. Thank you so much for joining me and discussing this mess here in the state of Georgia with our election board and our Secretary of State. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Replay 5 to 6 p.m. on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, and then via podcast. See you tomorrow at 9. Have a good one.